Are you looking for wholesome, humble, and budget-friendly dishes? The Amish have got you covered. Their recipes are all about simplicity and resourcefulness. Allow me to introduce you to Amish recipes you'll wish you knew sooner. In a time when pies had to do more than taste good, one dessert became a quiet hero of the pantry. Shoofly pie, an Amish classic, emerged as a practical solution for households where refrigeration wasn't an option. The key was molasses, a sweetener so rich and sticky it doubled as a preservative. While its peculiar name might raise eyebrows today, it simply refers to the need to shoo flies from its irresistibly sugary filling. The ingredients are as unpretentious as the pie's origins: molasses, flour, brown sugar, butter, and a sprinkle of cinnamon or nutmeg. A crumbly topping offsets the bold, bittersweet base, creating a dessert that's both indulgent and economical. Molasses, the star ingredient, is surprisingly rich in iron, calcium, and potassium. It's dessert that, dare we say it, might actually do your body some good. This pie can be served as breakfast, a mid-afternoon pick-me-up, or even a late-night indulgence. If you're worried about molasses overpowering the flavor, try blending it with honey or maple syrup for a milder take. After all, no one's judging when the goal is pie perfection on a budget. Baking has always been at the heart of Amish tradition, and soft pretzels are no exception. With roots tracing back to German immigrants who brought the pretzel-making craft to Pennsylvania in the 1700s, these hand-twisted treats became a staple of Amish bakeries. More than just a snack, pretzels held cultural significance as symbols of good luck and prosperity, though some might say the real luck lies in snagging one fresh from the oven. The dough is simplicity itself: flour, water, yeast, salt, and just a touch of sugar. What makes these pretzels unique is their iconic bath in a solution of water and baking soda before baking, which gives them that signature golden crust and soft, chewy interior. And while they may be simple, the versatility is endless. Enjoy them plain, sprinkle them with cinnamon sugar, or dip them in mustard or cheese sauce. They even make excellent sandwich buns. Yes, pretzel burgers are a thing. From a practical perspective, this recipe embodies Amish resourcefulness. It uses pantry staples, stretches ingredients, and creates a snack that's far cheaper than its store-bought counterparts. Skip the butter-drenched versions and you've got a low-fat, high-carb energy boost, ideal for hard-working hands. In the heart of Amish country, dessert is more than a treat. It's a reminder of life's simpler joys. Apple dumplings, a baked delight that dates back to early settlers, capture that spirit perfectly. These individually wrapped apples were born out of a culture that prioritized resourcefulness. With apples being plentiful in Pennsylvania orchards, turning them into dumplings was a way to stretch seasonal produce into something extraordinary. The process begins with basic ingredients: peeled and cored apples, pie dough, brown sugar, cinnamon, and butter. The apples are wrapped snugly in pastry, baked in a rich cinnamon syrup, and emerge golden and aromatic. The result is a dessert that looks like it belongs on the cover of a country cookbook and tastes even better. And if you're feeling adventurous, try swapping apples for pears or experimenting with fillings like raisins or walnuts. From a practical standpoint, this dessert is frugal in every sense. Leftover dough or bruised apples? Perfect for dumplings. And let's not forget, apples bring fiber, antioxidants, and a dose of vitamin C to the table. It's dessert that works harder than it has to. Paired with a scoop of vanilla ice cream, it's indulgence wrapped in tradition. In Amish kitchens, nothing goes to waste, and even the humblest ingredients can shine. Take pickled red beets and eggs, a dish that marries practicality with a stunning pop of color. This tradition traces back to the Pennsylvania Dutch, where pickling was essential for preserving food through long winters. The process is as straightforward as it is ingenious. Beets are boiled, sliced, and combined with vinegar, sugar, water, and spices like cloves and cinnamon. Hard-boiled eggs are added to the jar, and over a few days, they soak up the vibrant beet color, turning a deep, jewel-toned magenta. The result is as striking on the plate as it is on the palate, with a sweet, sour, and slightly earthy flavor. Beyond their beauty, this dish is a masterclass in resourcefulness. Beets are inexpensive, and combining them with eggs, one of the most affordable sources of protein, creates a dish that's as economical as it is versatile. Serve it as a snack, a salad topping, or even a conversation starter at your next potluck. Health-wise, beets pack antioxidants, while eggs provide protein and essential vitamins. It's a dish that's good for the eyes, the stomach, and maybe even the soul. In a world before social media, recipes traveled the old-fashioned way, through hands, homes, and shared traditions. Amish friendship bread is a prime example of this, not just a recipe, but a tradition steeped in connection. Its roots lie in the idea of a sourdough starter, passed from person to person, with each batch carrying a little piece of the past. It was a gesture of kindness, a way to nurture relationships in the simplest, most delicious way. The recipe starts with the starter itself, a mix of flour, sugar, milk, and yeast that ferments over time. Once you're handed a starter, you feed it for 10 days like a culinary pet before using part of it to bake. The remaining starter was passed along to friends and neighbors, spreading not just bread, but community. The bread itself is a sweet, spiced loaf, often flavored with cinnamon and sometimes with add-ins like nuts or chocolate chips. Economically, it's brilliant, using pantry staples to create a treat that's easily shared or stored. And health-wise, the fermentation process adds a slight probiotic benefit, while the loaf's wholesome ingredients make it a real sugary indulgence. A single starter can yield endless variations, ensuring that no two loaves or friendships are exactly the same. When you think of Amish cooking, few dishes embody their spirit of resourcefulness quite like chicken corn soup. This hearty, comforting recipe emerged from a practical need to make the most of every ingredient. In Pennsylvania Dutch tradition, nothing from the farm went to waste. Leftover chicken, fresh corn from summer fields, and even homemade egg noodles found their way into this one-pot wonder, making it a staple at gatherings and harvest celebrations. The ingredients are as unpretentious as they are nourishing. Shredded chicken, corn kernels, chicken broth, onions, and sometimes diced potatoes. But the secret to its unique texture lies in rivels, tiny dumplings made by combining flour and egg. This was a brilliant way to stretch the soup and make it heartier, feeding more people with less. From a health perspective, it's a winner. Packed with protein from the chicken, fiber from the corn, and wholesome carbohydrates from the rivels, it's a balanced meal in a bowl. Plus, it's incredibly versatile. Swap in canned corn during winter months or add leftover veggies for a customized twist. Frugal and filling, this soup exemplifies Amish practicality. In the 18th century, Pennsylvania Dutch settlers brought with them a culinary tradition that turned flour and sugar into a carnival-worthy creation. While funnel cakes are often associated with fairgrounds today, their roots are firmly planted in Amish and Mennonite communities. Originally known as dripping cake, these crispy, golden treats were a testament to the art of turning simple ingredients into something spectacular. The batter itself is straightforward: flour, eggs, milk, sugar, and a pinch of baking powder. The magic happens when it's poured through a funnel into hot oil, creating delicate, lacy designs that are as pleasing to the eye as they are to the palate. A dusting of powdered sugar finishes the masterpiece, though modern variations might add cinnamon or fruit toppings. Funnel cakes required minimal ingredients and no fancy equipment, making them accessible to families with limited means. Leftover batter could be saved for another day, stretching resources even further. Health benefits might not be the first thing you associate with fried dough, but there's no harm in a little indulgence now and then. And if you're making them at home, you control the oil, portion size, and toppings. In Amish homes, chicken and noodles was original comfort food, blending simple ingredients with a legacy of practicality. Historically, this meal was a way to make the most of farm staples. When a chicken was butchered, no part went to waste, and homemade egg noodles stretched the dish to serve a crowd. The recipe revolves around basic ingredients: shredded chicken, homemade egg noodles, chicken broth, and a touch of cream or butter for richness. The egg noodles are the star of the show, made with just flour and eggs, hand-rolled and cut with care. Once combined with a savory broth, They create a thick, hearty dish that's almost stew-like in texture. Versatility is where this recipe shines. Add carrots, celery, or peas for extra nutrition, or swap the chicken for turkey after a holiday meal. Leftovers are easily reheated, making it as practical as it is delicious. Health-wise, this dish is well-balanced. Lean protein from the chicken, carbohydrates from the noodles, and an option to sneak in vegetables. Economical, satisfying, and steeped in tradition, Amish chicken and noodles is a reminder that simple food can be simply extraordinary. In Amish cooking, simplicity meets indulgence in unexpected ways, and few desserts exemplify that better than peanut butter pie. This creamy treat is rooted in practicality, using common pantry staples to create something extraordinary. Peanut butter, often seen as a humble spread, takes center stage here, offering rich flavor without the need for costly ingredients. The ingredients are minimal: creamy peanut butter, cream cheese, powdered sugar, and whipped topping, all nestled in a graham cracker crust. There's no baking involved, just mixing, chilling, and enjoying. The end result is a pie that's decadently rich but surprisingly easy to make, ideal for any occasion that calls for dessert without hours in the kitchen. Versatility is key with this pie. Dress it up with chocolate shavings, chopped nuts, or even a drizzle of caramel if you're feeling fancy. And from a cost perspective, it's a winner. No exotic ingredients required, just things you likely have on hand. For a dessert, it holds a few hidden benefits. Peanut butter is a decent source of protein and healthy fats, and the pie itself is lower in sugar than many other sweet treats. In Amish communities, ingenuity often turns the simplest of ingredients into culinary treasures. Dandelion salad is a perfect example, a dish that transforms what many see as a pesky weed into a rustic, flavorful meal. Historically, dandelions were an easily foraged green, abundant in springtime and celebrated for their freshness after long winters of preserved foods. For the Amish, this salad was a symbol of renewal and resourcefulness. The ingredients are humble but effective: tender dandelion greens, hard-boiled eggs, crispy crumbled bacon, and a warm dressing made from vinegar, sugar, and bacon drippings. The warm dressing wilts the greens slightly, blending the earthy bitterness of the dandelion with the richness of the bacon and the tangy sweetness of the vinegar. It's a simple balance of flavors that feels far more indulgent than it has any right to be. Versatility is one of the salad's strengths. Can't find dandelions? Swap in spinach or arugula. Prefer a vegetarian option. Skip the bacon and use olive oil in the dressing. And from a health perspective, dandelion greens are a powerhouse packed with vitamins A and C, calcium, and even detoxifying properties. Some say the origin of whoopie pies is a matter of debate, but one thing is clear: their connection to Amish kitchens is unmistakable. Legend has it that Amish farmers and schoolchildren would find these sweet treats tucked into their lunch pails and exclaim, "Whoopie!" Whether that story is fact or folklore, it's hard not to feel the same joy when biting into one of these delightful desserts. At its core, a whoopie pie is two soft, cake-like cookies, typically chocolate, sandwiched around a creamy filling. The classic version features a marshmallow-based filling, though variations include cream cheese or buttercream. The ingredients are simple and accessible: flour, cocoa, sugar, eggs, butter, and vanilla, along with pantry staples for the filling. These were items Amish households often had on hand, making this dessert as practical as it is indulgent. Versatility is where whoopie pies shine. They can be flavored with pumpkin, red velvet, or even peanut butter for a twist on tradition. They're also easy to make in batches, perfect for sharing at community gatherings or packing into lunchboxes. Baked oatmeal, a staple in Amish kitchens, transforms a humble pantry ingredient into a dish that's as cozy as it is satisfying. Its origins lie in the Amish knack for turning basic staples into hearty meals, especially for large families or early risers heading out to work. The base ingredients couldn't be simpler: rolled oats, milk, eggs, brown sugar, and butter, with a pinch of cinnamon for warmth. Once mixed and baked, the result is a golden, cake-like texture that's worlds apart from your average stovetop oatmeal. Best of all, it reheats beautifully. making it ideal for busy mornings or meal prepping. Customization is where baked oatmeal truly shines. Add apples and raisins in the fall, fresh berries in the summer, or even chocolate chips for a touch of indulgence. Leftovers can be sliced and eaten cold, or warmed up with a splash of milk. Health-wise, baked oatmeal delivers. Packed with fiber, protein, and slow-burning carbs, it keeps you full for hours. Frugality is its charm, using ingredients most kitchens already have. It's breakfast with all the benefits of comfort food. No shortcuts, just wholesome simplicity baked to perfection. Amish cooking is deeply rooted in preservation, both of traditions and of ingredients. Pickled cabbage is a prime example, a tangy, sweet dish that reflects the Amish ingenuity for extending the life of fresh produce. Historically, pickling was an essential skill for families to ensure vegetables lasted through the long winter months. This particular recipe, with its balance of sweet and sour flavors, became a staple on the Amish table, served alongside hearty meals or at community gatherings. The ingredients are as straightforward as they come: shredded cabbage, vinegar, sugar, water, and a touch of salt. Some variations include celery seed or mustard seed for added flavor. The process is simple but effective, with the cabbage soaking up the pickling brine to achieve its characteristic crunch and tang. Practicality is one of its biggest selling points. It's an excellent way to use up extra cabbage from the garden, and the finished dish keeps for weeks in the refrigerator. Its versatility is equally impressive. Serve it as a side dish, add it to sandwiches, or use it to brighten up a plate of meat and potatoes. From a health perspective, pickled cabbage offers fiber, probiotics if naturally fermented, and a dose of vitamins C and K. In Amish kitchens, practicality often trumps extravagance, and few dishes embody that principle like poor man's steak. Born out of the need to make the most of affordable ingredients, this recipe turns humble ground beef into a hearty, satisfying meal. It's not steak in the traditional sense, but its rich flavor and comforting texture make it every bit as memorable. The ingredients are straightforward. Ground beef, breadcrumbs, milk, onions, and seasonings are combined to form thick patties. These are browned, then baked in a creamy gravy made from milk, flour, and butter. The result is a dish that's flavorful, filling, and surprisingly elegant for something so budget-friendly. Versatility is where poor man's steak really shines. Add mushrooms to the gravy, use turkey instead of beef for a leaner option, or pair it with mashed potatoes, noodles, or rice. The dish adapts effortlessly to what you have on hand, making it a favorite for feeding a family without breaking the bank. From a health perspective, the protein in the beef provides energy, while the gravy and sides make it a well-rounded meal. It's a masterclass in Amish resourcefulness, taking inexpensive ingredients and turning them into a dish that feels like a luxury. In Amish culture, preserving the bounty of the harvest is as much about tradition as it is about practicality. Strawberry jam, a staple in Amish households, is a perfect example of how simple ingredients can capture the essence of summer in a jar. With fresh strawberries often abundant during the growing season, turning them into jam ensured nothing went to waste while providing a sweet treat to enjoy year-round. The ingredient list is refreshingly short: ripe strawberries, sugar, and lemon juice. Unlike store-bought versions, Amish strawberry jam is typically made without preservatives, relying on careful canning techniques to keep it fresh. The process is straightforward: cooking the berries with sugar until thickened, then sealing the mixture in sterilized jars. The result is a jam that's vibrant in both color and flavor, far superior to anything you'll find on a grocery store shelf. Versatility is another strength of this jam. Spread it on homemade bread, swirl it into oatmeal, or even use it as a filling for baked goods. And from a health perspective, it offers the natural vitamins and antioxidants of strawberries, without the additives found in commercial products. Economical, wholesome, and bursting with flavor, Amish strawberry jam is a testament to resourcefulness. In Amish communities, soups are a way to bring people together and make the most of what's available. Ham and green bean soup is a prime example, rooted in the Amish tradition of using every part of the harvest and nothing going to waste. This dish was often made after curing a ham, utilizing the leftover bone to infuse the broth with flavor. For families with large gardens and limited budgets, it was a practical way to stretch ingredients while feeding everyone at the table. The recipe starts with simple components: a ham bone or leftover ham, fresh green beans, potatoes, onions, and water or chicken broth. The ham provides a rich, smoky base, while the potatoes add hardiness and the green beans bring a garden-fresh brightness. Everything simmers together until the flavors meld, creating a soup that's as comforting as it is nourishing. This soup's versatility is its charm. Swap in other vegetables like carrots or celery, or make it vegetarian by skipping the ham and using vegetable broth. From a health perspective, it's a great source of protein, fiber, and essential vitamins, all in one pot. In the world of Amish baking, simplicity often takes center stage, and custard pie is a shining example. This dessert dates back to a time when families relied on pantry staples and fresh farm ingredients to create something sweet without extravagance. The ingredients are as humble as they come: eggs, milk, sugar, vanilla, and a pinch of nutmeg. The filling comes together quickly, poured into an unbaked pie shell and baked until it's golden and just barely jiggling in the center. The result is a creamy, silky custard with a touch of spice that feels far more indulgent than the effort it takes to prepare. What makes custard pie so versatile is its adaptability. Add a handful of shredded coconut for texture, a swirl of chocolate for richness, or fresh fruit to brighten it up. And it's practical. Made with ingredients most kitchens already have, it's the perfect dessert to whip up on a whim. Health-wise, it's rich in protein from the eggs and calcium from the milk, proving that not all desserts have to be empty calories. Elegant yet economical, Amish custard pie is a dessert that celebrates the beauty of simplicity. In Amish kitchens, leftovers are never wasted. They're opportunities. Potato cakes are a perfect example of this philosophy. These golden, crispy patties evolved as a way to breathe new life into yesterday's mashed potatoes. Historically, dishes like this reflected the Amish commitment to resourcefulness, ensuring that every bit of food served a purpose. The ingredients are straightforward and likely already in your pantry: cold mashed potatoes, an egg for binding, a bit of flour, and a touch of salt and pepper. Some variations include grated onions, cheese, or herbs for extra flavor. The mixture is formed into small patties, pan-fried until crisp on the outside and tender within. It's a simple process, but the result is nothing short of magical. The versatility of potato cakes is unmatched. They can be served for breakfast alongside eggs, as a snack with a dollop of sour cream, or as a side dish at dinner. If you're feeling adventurous, try adding chopped ham or veggies to the mix. Nutritionally, these cakes deliver a good dose of energy from the potatoes and protein from the egg. From a frugality standpoint, they're a dream, stretching leftovers into something exciting and delicious. Few things evoke the warmth of an Amish kitchen like the aroma of freshly baked bread. Amish white bread is a cornerstone of their baking tradition, designed to be simple, practical, and utterly satisfying. Historically, this bread became a household staple because of its affordability and its ability to stretch ingredients, feeding large families while using basic pantry items. The ingredients list is as straightforward as it gets: flour, water, sugar, salt, yeast, and a little oil or butter. Once kneaded, shaped, and baked, it transforms into a soft, fluffy loaf with a golden crust. It's the kind of bread that makes even store-bought butter feel like a gourmet treat. The versatility of Amish white bread is unmatched. Use it for sandwiches, toast, or even French toast the next day. Its mild flavor also lends itself well to savory or sweet additions. Think garlic and herbs or cinnamon and raisins. It's the perfect blank canvas. From a health perspective, homemade bread skips the preservatives and additives found in many store-bought options, giving you a cleaner, more wholesome product. And economically, it's a game changer. A single loaf costs a fraction of what you'd pay at the store, yet it tastes infinitely better. For the Amish, preserving the harvest is both a necessity and an art, and apple butter is a delicious result of that tradition. This sweet, spiced spread originated as a way to use up an abundance of apples, often collected during the peak of the harvest season. Unlike traditional butter, it contains no dairy, just apples cooked low and slow until they caramelize into a rich, smooth spread. The ingredients are deceptively simple: apples, cider or water, sugar, and spices like cinnamon and cloves. The apples are simmered for hours, allowing their natural sugars to intensify while the mixture thickens to perfection. The slow cooking process is where the magic happens, transforming humble fruit into a velvety spread that's bursting with autumnal flavor. Apple butter is as practical as it is versatile. Spread it on warm Amish white bread, swirl it into oatmeal, or use it as a secret ingredient in baked goods for extra moisture and depth of flavor. Apple butter can even double as a healthier sweetener in recipes because it retains the fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants of its core ingredient while avoiding the preservatives of store-bought options. In Amish kitchens, frugality is a way of life, and fried cornmeal mush is a dish that exemplifies this perfectly. Originating as a way to make use of simple, inexpensive ingredients, it became a staple breakfast for families who needed hearty, filling meals to start their day. This dish turns basic cornmeal into something golden, crispy, and undeniably satisfying, proving that simplicity can often be the most delicious choice. The process begins with a few humble ingredients: cornmeal, water, salt, and sometimes a touch of butter. These are cooked into a thick porridge, poured into a pan, and left to cool and firm up. The magic happens the next morning when slices of the set mush are fried in a skillet until golden and crisp on the outside, with a creamy interior. The result is a dish that pairs beautifully with syrup, honey, or even savory toppings like gravy. Versatility is one of its strengths. Serve it as a sweet breakfast, a savory side dish, or even a snack. Its long shelf life when refrigerated makes it an excellent way to prepare in advance and stretch ingredients. In Amish kitchens, soups are the heart of frugality, and bean soup is a prime example of how resourcefulness can create something both humble and nourishing. This dish has deep roots in practicality, often made during colder months when dried beans, onions, and a few pantry staples were all that families had to rely on. Despite its simplicity, Amish bean soup is a testament to how minimal ingredients can yield maximum flavor. The ingredients are straightforward: dried beans, navy, Great Northern or pinto, onions, carrots, celery, and water or broth. Traditionally, a ham bone or smoked meat was added for flavor, though it's equally delicious as a vegetarian option. A few hours of slow simmering transforms these basics into a hearty, flavorful soup that warms both body and soul. Versatility is key here. Leftover vegetables or scraps can easily find their way into the pot, making it adaptable to whatever you have on hand. The soup freezes well, so large batches are perfect for meal prep. Beans are a nutritional powerhouse, packed with fiber, protein, and essential vitamins, while remaining one of the most affordable pantry staples. Amish macaroni salad is a staple at potlucks, family reunions, and summer picnics, where it's as much about tradition as taste. This dish highlights the Amish preference for simple, hearty recipes that stretch ingredients and feed a crowd. Its signature sweet and tangy flavor sets it apart from typical macaroni salads, offering a unique twist on a familiar classic. The ingredients are delightfully simple: elbow macaroni, hard-boiled eggs, diced celery, onions, and sweet pickles, all tossed in a creamy dressing made from mayonnaise, mustard, sugar, and a splash of vinegar. The balance of sweet and tangy flavors is what makes this salad so memorable, and it's a texture lover's dream with its combination of tender pasta and crunchy vegetables. Versatility is one of this recipe's strengths. Add shredded carrots for color, swap the sweet pickles for dill, or mix in cooked chicken or ham to turn it into a light meal. It's also incredibly economical. Macaroni is one of the most budget-friendly pantry staples, and the dressing relies on common household ingredients. Frugal, flavorful, and perfect for feeding a crowd, Amish macaroni salad is proof that a simple dish can become a cherished favorite. In Amish kitchens, simplicity and comfort often go hand in hand, and peanut butter spread is a prime example. This sweet, creamy concoction was traditionally served as a topping for bread during fellowship meals, turning an ordinary slice into something extraordinary. With its rich flavor and smooth texture, it's become a beloved staple across Amish households. The ingredients are peanut butter, marshmallow fluff, and corn syrup or honey. The combination creates a spread that's light, fluffy, and easy to whip up in minutes. It's an exercise in frugality, using pantry staples to create a treat that feels far more luxurious than its humble origins suggest. Its versatility is where it truly shines. Spread it on freshly baked bread, crackers, or pancakes for an instant burst of sweetness. It's also an excellent dip for apples, pretzels, or celery, making it as practical for snacks as it is for breakfast. Nutritionally, it provides a dose of protein and healthy fats from the peanut butter, though it's undoubtedly a treat rather than a health food. That said, it's a delightful reminder that sometimes a little sweetness can brighten even the simplest meal. In Amish culture, feeding a family often means creating meals that are hearty, simple, and capable of stretching ingredients to serve a crowd. Enter the Amish casserole, a dish that perfectly embodies these values. Casseroles have long been a staple in Amish households, offering a practical way to bring together leftover ingredients and pantry staples into a warm, satisfying dinner that's greater than the sum of its parts. The recipe typically includes wide egg noodles, ground beef, tomato soup, and a creamy element like sour cream or cottage cheese, all baked together under a golden layer of cheese. The result is a rich, comforting dish that feels like a hug on a plate. It's versatile too. Chicken can replace beef, cream of mushroom soup can swap in for tomato, and vegetables like peas or carrots can be added for extra nutrition. Frugality is where this dish shines. By repurposing leftovers and using inexpensive staples, it delivers a big payoff for a minimal cost. Nutritionally, it's a balanced meal when paired with a simple side salad or steamed veggies, offering protein, carbs, and essential vitamins. Another thing that was really exclusive to the 1970s was the country's rediscovered love for casseroles. Things like hot dog casseroles are just proof of this all around. But really, you had a casserole for just about every fruit, ingredient, and meat you had ever heard of. The deal with this one is that it was a cheap casserole and a super beginner-friendly one. Seriously, your nephew could make this if you gave him honest instructions and believed in him enough. I mean, what really is there to do? You just take the pasta and the hot dogs, layer them casserole style, and pop them in the oven. Bam, you're done. And now you have enough food to either share with the family twice over or enough to last you the entire day and then some. Casseroles were super easy to make, convenient, and usually affordable, but could be made with super fancy ingredients if you were feeling like pushing your wallet and could fit just about any taste palette in the entire country. That made them pretty damn hard to beat. Plus, the 70s was known for being a massive return-to-work culture and the grind lifestyle for a lot of Americans, so the need for big, easy, and simple dishes was major. Nowadays, there are a lot of convenient apps and services to do that for you, so there's no need to bother with things like casseroles every other day. So the next thing on our list is baked turnips and cream sauces, but dear viewer, I know you aren't 5, and I know you're curious about how cream sauces could even be a thing in a time like this. After all, if people were struggling to get enough milk and eggs, where on God's green earth were they finding the money to get cream for? You see, my friend, there was a stark difference in lifestyles between two types of people: those that grew up in the city and those that grew up in the countryside. Now, for the people trapped in those urban jungles during the Dust Bowl, I completely agree with you. Where did they get their cream from? For the ones living in rural shanty towns, though, well, you gotta know that they came from a long tradition of farming, a tradition that by the 1930s was still relatively upheld by most families. This meant that lots of these farming households had their own cattle and cows, and that's how they would get their milk and cream. Baked turnips, on the other hand, were something that was more commonly seen in the cities. It was, after all, something that primarily required an oven. In rural areas, it was a lot more common for people to pass the time with boiled turnips instead, but sometimes people would get lucky and find themselves having baked turnips along with a cream sauce to go with it. So we're going to go up to the upper class side of things for a bit. This wasn't a dish that anyone else could have afforded to make or eat back then anyway. Flaky buttermilk biscuits are all well and good if you buy them as a snack at your local mart. But you have not tried a buttermilk biscuit until you get a veteran baker to make these for you. Who better than family? And what family member is more skilled in baking than your trusty grandmother? Well, not all of them cook or bake, but the nation has more than its fair share of grandma's creamy buttermilk recipes floating around the internet and cookbooks from dozens of years ago. Practice always makes perfect, and most home chefs learned that the great secret of an impeccable buttermilk biscuit is to not overmix so that you avoid flat and tough biscuits. These were extremely common as snacks to give to children in the family during holidays and were the perfect pairing for a gift basket. Speaking of molasses, they also went really great with some slow-baked beans. Molasses have a knack for adding a lot of deep flavor to a dish, and the fact that these were usually left overnight to absorb all of it made for probably the best baked beans people could get in those times. It was especially popular as a summertime meal. Baked beans were not too hard to get, not the tinned versions because those were still pricey. Once you had some, you would just leave them in water to soften, and then the beans would be baked for 8 hours straight overnight. Making it was a whole day, literally. But once you were done with the prep work, it was all just a waiting game. And this was one time where being patient really paid off. Before I get into why it died down, first, I need to talk about what a hamburger helper even is. This was a packaged convenience food product that General Mills came up with in 1971, and it was a big part of their whole Betty Crocker shtick. The idea was to make something out of a pound of ground beef, and despite the name, there's no hamburger ingredients besides the beef. You had a box with dried pasta, rice, and a seasoning mix. It actually became a big thing in the 70s because it became a symbol of processed food and was one of the most popular packaged products in the nation. On the other hand, it is definitely something I would say is entirely nostalgia-driven now. Hamburger helpers are still available, and they're a convenient meal to go for. Don't get me wrong, but the days of its trends are dead in the water and in the past now. People would go out in droves to get a fix of a hamburger helper back in the 70s, and this was a very much socially expected thing to do, by the way. Like, you know how your friends call you for a round of Chipotle and gossip? That was pretty much the idea back then, too. The things that did this bad boy in are movements like the health-conscious trends that were constantly spreading over America. Lots of people were in favor of healthier, smaller, and leaner meals made using canned food. And their argument was that the national rise of fast food, fusion food, and street food was really just doing a number on everyone's guts. On the other hand, convenience culture really has outpaced dishes like these in longevity, at least. For reasons like these, it's hard to find a good hamburger helper, and even harder still to find someone who still swears by them. Potato and chickpea curry with rice was a really good combination that was pretty much built for the environment people were finding themselves in the Dust Bowl. The recipe changed with each different area and state, but for the most part, the core mix of potatoes, dried peas, and rice was the same. People would substitute white rice with brown rice wherever they could because the latter was cheaper, and it made sense to stretch your pantries out as much as you possibly could. Potatoes, especially, were a rock-solid friend to rely on for the American people. They were one of the easiest things you could possibly grow. You could make so many things perfect for a large number of people with them, and they were full of health benefits. A side bonus was that they'd really keep you full, but all this should give you an idea. It was almost impossible to exist without having a good stock of potatoes in your root basement. Onions, garlic, a water-based broth, and just thyme and salt pepper were used for the curry. Pretty bare bones, right? Yet to them, that was still a phenomenal dish to come home to. Speaking of how different things were in their time due to the economical strife, one thing that got really popular back when your grandparents were still young was sausage gravy and biscuits. This might seem like an outlandish combo to us today, and we admit it takes a bit of getting used to, but the magic is all in the gravy. Biscuits and gravy are already something Americans have been pretty accustomed to eating, especially in the 20th century, but innovation is one of the finer points of the country, and culinary matters are no exception. People eventually found out that using pork sausage crumbles enriched the gravy and made it irresistible, especially if they were smoked. Usually biscuits like jumbo buttermilk ones make for a great side to the dish, but even the gravy alone was worth eating on its own. Egg drop soup sounds a little fancier than it is, but have you never had a simple dish that knocked the socks off of you? Just a 2 or 3 ingredient show that really hit home, ticked every box, and left you with a smile? Egg drop soup was a lot like that. It was just diced potatoes and onions, which might get you thinking of the pie we just went over, but this is more like a broth. If chicken broth was there, then of course that was the foundation, but water worked too. Once the potatoes started cooking, you would drizzle some scrambled eggs before adding whole ones. It might look lumpy and score a little less for presentation, but it deserves a solid A+ just for the taste alone, especially if you would pair it with some leftover bread. Vegetarian chili definitely had its heyday in the same time as those moments I was talking about. Listen, when I say movement, I don't mean a 3-day bandwagon full of peaceful sit-ins and protests like we have today. I mean, like nationally, parents everywhere were livid. They couldn't stand that their kids were actually preferring to stay inside with a McDonald's Happy Meal and the television screen, and lots of them became super proactive about their family's diet and eating habits because of the massive revamp in culture. I mean, in this same century, these people went from surviving off of foraging wild mushrooms to watching moving pictures on a screen, having a magic box that just cools all their food full-time, slow cookers, the internet, computers, and God knows what else. All this to say, it was a fast-paced era, and people reacted with what they knew worked: vegetables. If the Depression proved anything, it was that there was a massive problem with people's diets. It wasn't economical, and it definitely wasn't healthy, and the alternative wasn't as impossible to switch to as most people would have you believe. Circumstances like this saw the rise of vegetarian chili and vegan cookbooks, but unfortunately, it couldn't make the cut, especially in the South, where people just outright rejected it. In the Dust Bowl, one thing that was actually more common than you may ever think was lasagna with homemade noodles. Though of course, as with everything here, there is a catch. It's not the lasagna you're thinking of or the one Garfield's famous for falling in love with. Not anywhere close, no. It was instead vegetable lasagna, and the noodles were really DIY serviceable versions that just barely met the mark. It was such a disaster in Texas and Oklahoma, Kansas that people there were lucky to have anything even remotely resembling noodles still. After all, most of the stuff you'd use for homemade noodles was going through crop failure or food shortages. People really began to get into homemade noodles after they had a bit more experience growing food on their own, and when they could more reliably get potatoes out of their victory gardens. As far as the lasagna went, cabbages, spinach, carrots, kale, onions, broccoli, anything people had that was green would go in it. This was also a dish that inspired people to really take advantage of canned food too, and they definitely did by substituting a lot of root vegetables with canned goods. Don't get the wrong idea though, these were really makeshift versions of both dishes. It was nowhere near an actual vegetable lasagna either. It was more fitting to call it a lot of layered vegetables, really. Let's head on over to how people did things in the winter. A recipe that is largely forgotten right now, but still made some noise back when it was really popular in the 20th century, is shrimp and grits. The secret to an incredible plate of these was all in the milk, butter, and cheddar cheese. Depending on the quality and how you handled it, you would ever have shrimp that had not really absorbed the flavor or the best seafood experience you could hope to have at home. Luckily, over many long years, the home cooks of our nation perfected the recipe and kept passing it down, one generation to the next. Some chopped bacon for a smoky flavor, or sausage drippings were also really popular picks for older chefs to run with. Grits would be made with dent corn and often boiled, then mixed with the butter and milk. How did your family make these, if they ever did? Stone soup is almost exactly what it sounds like, and it does involve a solid rock being in your soup. But hear us out, it is only temporary. Now, the origin of this term dates back to a European folktale about how two people would come into a town, convince everyone to share a bit of food, and then make a meal for the entire town. Sharing is caring, right? Anyway, the actual technique concerning food is to heat a rock in a fire and then place it in a bowl of soup so that it can cook it. People would add meat trimmings and scraps, plus carrots and cabbage to the soup to give it more nutritional value as well as flavor, and it did more or less work. What the real magic was that it browned the soup, which is something that you could not get in most standard soups people prepared. It also added a much richer flavor overall that was to die for, and people started to adopt the technique as it made soup on a budget much better than normal. Again, disrespecting an icon has never been my scene, but I just don't think peanut butter sandwiches are anyone's go-to breakfast anymore like they used to be in the 70s. Really, when was the last time you stopped and made yourself a genuine peanut butter sandwich you were looking forward to right before heading out for work or college or whatever it is? People would much rather prefer to either grab some takeout, get a cute little coffee these days, or just take their Stanley bottle with whatever electrolyte-boosting drink of the day they have. Don't get me wrong, kids and teens will still eat these up, and they make for some amazing late-night snacks. But I feel like overall, we've started to move on a bit from the days where peanut butter sandwiches were reigning supreme over all else, you know? But hey, if you feel differently, please make that known in the comments. One of the other things that was pushed to the mainstream thanks to the Dust Bowl was the reliance on one-pot meals. Stuff like vegetable pot pie with a biscuit crust really made the rounds just about everywhere. It was because it was so easy to pool together different kinds of vegetables to make one massive serving of pot pie, oftentimes more than just for a family. People would basically realize this. If they shared the amount of vegetables and resources they had, they could honestly make a lot more. Community-based ingredient sharing and food preparation once again became a thing. Entire neighborhoods were once again eating together, and it was a big part of how people managed to survive. This pot pie was a one-stop solution to massive amounts of hunger, and often people would throw in whatever kind of vegetables they had in there. This would typically look like your average mix of cabbage, onions, garlic, tomatoes, potatoes, and the rest, but people would try to add in aromatics to get some flavor going too. It was little stuff like this that really helped keep things together for everyone because, on their own, people didn't have the energy to cook big meals like this very often. There are some baking challenges that only your grandmother is equipped for, and making the pinnacle of brown butter sweet potato pies was one of them. Seriously, even bakeries and fancy eateries have struggled to nail every aspect of a pie, but for most home chefs in the United States, it seems to be just another Tuesday with the oven. You take a flaky pie crust with a velvety potato filling that is usually topped off with whipped cream, but most older cooks preferred maple syrup as that was what they grew up with. Just a bit of dark brown sugar would elevate this dish into the perfect dessert, though it would often steal the show entirely on its own. The thing is built to make your mouth water, and we mean looks-wise too, since the brown and caramel hues of the pie just make it all the more enticing. Have you ever heard of this one before, and would you try it? We have had a pretty concerning lack of pies on the list so far, right? Let's fix that by going down memory lane where we can find potato and onion pies, a delicacy that took America by storm, especially in the Midwest. Dried potatoes, sliced onions sprinkled with salt, pepper, and garlic, and you had a pretty killer pie. If by some luck the average household back then had some cheese to spare as well, then some serious fine dining would take place. Parmesan cheese was something Grandma incorporated much later when it became readily available again, but the authentic gritty potato and onion pie of the early 30s was an experience in and of itself. Some dishes just exude an air of comfort and homeliness, like being back in your childhood neighborhood at 7 a.m. on a really sunny day. This was definitely one of those. If we go back to the 1970s, we're going to discover another really popular dessert, which is rice pudding. Now, far be it from me to disrespect one of the greats. Rice pudding has been around far longer than I have, after all. Still, what's true is sadly still true. The days of glory for rice pudding are definitely far away in the past now. Dude, seriously, back in the 70s, this was all people ate for dessert. How could they not? 1, it was stupid easy to make, and 2, it was really convenient and sweet. All you needed was some cheap rice and milk, and that wasn't really breaking anyone's bank account or putting their budget out of order for the month. What you would get was this perfect dessert supper hybrid that would make perfect sense to have after a big meal or even in the cold winter months. I mean, it was definitely a lot more affordable than ordering a tub of ice cream and a lot healthier too. People have unfortunately started to head in different directions with rice though. These days, if people do eat it, it's mostly with things like chicken tikka masala or rice bowls like katsu curry. Not really any room left in the current climate for a rice-based dessert. Homemade gnocchi with noodles was still something that the relatively well-off and affluent families in the States were able to eat, and it was entirely something limited to certain parts of big urban hubs like Chicago, New York, and Washington. Gnocchi is an Italian dish, which I'm sure you already know. What's interesting is that it actually came on over to the States thanks to Italian immigrants, and back then, it hadn't become the fine dining appetizer that it's known to be today. It wasn't exactly that pricey either. Back then, Italian communities full of immigrants were still making it whenever they could. For the gnocchi, all you would need is flour, water, and dough. These were things that were out of the reach of normal people, sure, but to people with generational wealth? Well, it was mostly business as usual. Don't get me wrong, even though they were impacted by the recession and the Dust Bowl, there wasn't a single American home that wasn't. Did they draw the short end of the stick, though? Not by a long shot. This wasn't a dish you'd see anywhere outside of real bougie neighborhoods. Want to go for another odd dish that brightens the mood up at parties, holidays, and feasts alike? Broccoli cheese casserole was the American populace's answer to concerns about how the diet of kids these days just does not have enough green at them. The age-old question of how do we make broccoli taste as good as a cheeseburger still stood pretty firm though, and one genius in the 1800s had the bright idea of mixing broccoli into a casserole. As you must be quite familiar with by now, America tends to add cheese to anything it can see, so it does not take a lot to figure out how this came to be. A creamy sauce with fresh broccoli florets and cheese crackers are a tried and tested 1900s combo. Bread pudding has been a subject of much discussion in the history books of our developments with food. It would be a bit of an undersell to call it polarizing, since some people claim it is the ultimate comfort food, and there simply is not anything like it. Others think it is an affront to the concept of bread and pudding simultaneously, and fails to really capture the benefits of either. Still, the makeshift recipes from the 1930s were worth trying then, and are still worth trying now, as they put bread pudding on the map and helped it stay there. It was a great way to repurpose leftover stale bread, and despite its record as the poor man's pudding, it was a common recipe in church cookbooks even before the recession hit. All you had to do was get some boiling water, sugar, spices, and bread, and sure, it was not the most appealing or appetizing lump of dough to eat, but it got you through the day, and in times of extreme scarcity, who could ask for more? One of the soups that took off during the 1970s was stuffed cabbage soup. Remember how I said people really became besties with cabbage overall? Yeah, that meant that they were exploring its potential in every avenue of food known to the average American Joe. You had cabbage casseroles, cabbage stir-fries, cabbage stews, and now stuffed cabbage soup. I mean, on the one hand, it was boring as anything could be, and it really needed a lot of aromatics and seasonings to become something you could justify spending time on. On the other hand, it was dirty cheap, like unfairly cheap. And for some people, it was just free. That's right. If you had your own farmland with a crop-growing culture in your family, then you were likely raised growing cabbage, or at least having it in the home a lot. In rural areas, low-income ones and urban ones, for different reasons, whether it was the economics of it at all or the fact that modern American consumerism as they knew it was slowly heading to massive health problems for all participants, people flew like moths to cabbage soup. Swiss chard is a leafy green we don't hear too much about anymore, and that was the case back then too. I don't blame people, since its glory days were definitely before the 20th century. But people remembered this little green once again during the Dust Bowl. People would pair this up with white bean soup, which was something that the masses found it very hard to live without. Why? They were a fabulous source of protein, they are affordable, you could even forage them, and these could actually be stored for months. This was a time where people were desperate for protein, by the way. A lot of good cuts of meat were more expensive than ever, and just out of the reach of most common people, while a lot of other kinds of things like nuts and almonds just weren't filling you up enough for the amount of money or time it would take to get enough of them. You had to be really smart with every cent, so people would go for things like white bean soup with Swiss chard. This was a versatile combination that had every pro health-wise on top of being something that could feed the entire family and be made with minimal effort. Collard greens and ham hocks have been a combo that has very faithfully stood the passing of time, and we think it is partly due to all the different takes on it that families keep coming up with. You hear cabbage and your heart does not exactly burst with excitement, but collard greens is another story. Pair it up with smoky ham hocks and you have yourself a meal on a budget like no other. A ham hock itself is a portion of bone with connective tissue and some meat that is covered in fat and skin, and the other name for these is pork knuckles. With some sweet onions, garlic, and chicken broth, this was a recipe that would give any other dish a run for its money, and it was great for your diet too. Gotta make sure your grandkids grow up right and proper after all. Let's not forget all the times a well-made bacon and onion sandwich made the difference between an exhausting, bland day and one with a warm and welcome surprise. Most people would be real cautious with their bacon, as the days of simply frying up a few strips and eating them as is were gone. You had to make each cut of meat count, especially bacon. While it was still attainable on average, its new prices were not doing anybody any favors. So people would dice up some onions, saute them until they were that perfect golden brown, and make the bread themselves. Sometimes out of stuff like sawdust when dough would not be available, and there you had it. A perfectly vitalizing sandwich ready to put the spirit back into your tired body. Grandmas had this perfected down to a science, as they seemed to have developed a natural intuition for how much bacon, salt, and onions a good sandwich needed. Something else that was also insanely popular and stopped being that way was oven-baked chicken drumsticks. This is also something I will entirely, and many food analysts and critics will agree with me on, fast food. See, why would you ever bother with the laborious process of marinating drumsticks, gathering the ingredients, making up a spice blend, making a sauce, making a dip, cutting up fries, and going to the store for some affordable soda when Kentucky Fried Chicken has a deal out for a 3-piece combo for $10? Is $10 outrageous for a 3-piece combo? Most assuredly. Is KFC still undoubtedly delicious, convenient, and deeply ingrained into the American cultural zeitgeist? Absolutely. It's not even that there aren't any benefits to making this stuff at home. There are an insane amount of arguments and good reasons as to why it is healthier, smarter, and more economical to just handle your cravings at home with an air fryer, some olive oil or vegetable oil, and drumsticks you know you can trust. People don't work like that, though. And unfortunately, the saying that humans are creatures of habit couldn't be any more true. People are far too hooked on fast food chains for their supply of fried food, especially classic things like drumsticks. And that just means that ovens don't see a lot of use outside of TikTok trends and one-off videos that content creators might do. Here is a dish that you have probably heard of one too many times but never gotten enough of: meatloaf with mashed potatoes. Let's just say that comfort cooking really does not get much higher than this, nor more relaxing. Sitcoms, movies, and comedies across the decades that depict middle-class families always have somebody serving up a killer meatloaf, and it is for good reason. Our generation's parents always grew up eating a hearty meatloaf with a side of perfectly mushy soft potatoes, so it is no wonder that they kept the custom going. Today, mashed potatoes have an 85% popularity rate, which even beats hamburgers and cheeseburgers. You would think that those would be America's top one, but it seems nothing can beat Grand's meatloaf classics. Despite the prices of white sugar dropping as a whole after the First World War, leading molasses to decline in popularity, they made a strong comeback as the engine fueled a great batch of molasses cookies. People also started abandoning white sugar during the Second World War, and it caused them to look for alternatives for their yearly Christmas baking sessions, and the government was already pushing on molasses for widespread public use pretty hard. Eventually, people saw the value, and the ones that did not have to, because it was so much cheaper to get molasses than any other ingredient. That, along with some sorghum syrup, meant that people could still enjoy a fresh batch of hot cookies and warm milk to welcome the winter. It might not seem like much, but maintaining tiny traditions like that meant a lot to people and kept their spirits going as the days got harder and costlier. Acorn squash with wild rice and herbs was one of the best holiday season combinations to have during all this mess, and that was for a few reasons. Wild rice was a regional thing. It was an important food source for indigenous communities that had long-held traditions around foraging and growing it. They knew what they were doing, so despite the toughness of the Dust Bowl's environment, they managed to get away with some amount of it. Herbs, on the other hand, were very bare bones. You had your pantry staples like oregano, mint, thyme, and parsley, but beyond that, you shouldn't expect much. Acorn squash was the real star of the show here. It could be used in a lot of things, but that wasn't what was special about it. This was one resilient crop. I mean, seriously, it barely failed. Comparatively to all the others, it seemed like squashes were still far easier to grow than most other things. It is only natural for people to then start adopting things like acorn squash with wild rice and herbs into their diet. They had already become a lot more familiar with wild rice than you'd expect, but dishes like these, especially in the winter, only hammered that appreciation home even more. If you enjoyed this video, let us know your favorite Amish dish in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.